Good morning. How's everyone doing? Hopefully this week we will have good connection, and that would be nice to have that. So anyway, good morning, Joanne, Kathy. Is everyone ready for Christmas? We still have some things to accomplish and get done before that arrives. Hopefully you're doing good with all of that. As always, as we talk about the blocks that we're going to do this week, please, jump into the chat box and say good morning, hello, whatever, and be sure to ask your questions and put those in the chat box so that everybody can see, or if you have a thought or a suggestion, that's really great for others who are reading the chat boxes, because you may have some insights that I certainly don't have, and that could be helpful to others. So if you could do that, as always, that would be wonderful. And it's great to see everyone. We're getting close to bringing this all to a closure with the Christmas patterns. I've been playing with them on my board, and so next week we'll take a look at putting them together a little bit and give some suggestions and ideas if you're looking at putting them all together for a quilt possibly, or again, all of these blocks would make into a nice table topper, adding one or two blocks together for table runners, for hot pads, for trivets, or as gifts. The other thing is that several of these blocks, especially the 12-inch blocks that we're doing, putting them together into a bag for the outside of a tote bag for shopping, or whatever you need to use a tote bag for. So that is another possibility for friends and family for you to do as part of last minute Christmas gifts that you're still working on, or whatever. So anyway, good morning. We've got some other people coming in from both East and West Coast, and a few Midwesterners. So I appreciate you being here this morning. Today we're going to work on another type of Christmas tree. It's another block that I've made often, and especially at Christmas time, as part of wall hanging quilts, as part of those table toppers, that type of thing. It's going to be a 12.5-inch block, and then I've got another one that we're going to be working on, and it is those peppermint candies that you can buy. A few years back I found this pattern, and it came from Moda, and it's called Peppermint Candy Quilt. And it was designed by Susan Vaughn of the Felted Pear. If you know her or have seen her work for before, and she did this for Moda, and I don't remember how long ago it was, but it's called Peppermint Candy Quilt by Susan Vaughn of the Felted Pear. And I'm only taking a part of the block because I only wanted a piece of the candy as I was looking at my quilt, but you could certainly add to it. And so we do not have a pattern for that today, because you can go to the Moda site or just Google Peppermint Candy Quilt by Susan Vaughn, and you will find the pattern for it. And it is her pattern. It's not mine. So anyway, let's get started. I'm going to start today with the tree. And you've seen this tree many times. These are, the dimensions that I put together for this so that I would come out with a 12.5-inch block. I've made a portion of it right here, and just to get started so you can see how that goes. And both of the patterns today have the flip and stitch technique that goes with that. And you certainly could, break this down and make it smaller, or even go larger if you wanted, a little bit larger piece. So I've got up through F, so I'm going to do the top two pieces with you today, just so you can get an idea of how this finishes off. And I'm going to put the pattern to the side so I can see it. although I don't really need the dimensions for it at this point. So to do this, you have your center, your centerpiece or part of the tree there, and then you have your side pieces, and I chose to go with the little star or snowflakes. And what you want to do is on these two pieces, your 45-degree angle, and if you were to do this on your own, that 45-degree angle goes, on one side, and you would draw that angle on your piece, and then move it to the other side and draw it. So you want them to go opposite ways, and actually, if they're in front of you, they're going to look like a top of a tree with that. So these go on either side of your piece, and of course, to hold them in place as you move them, you can drop a pin in it, and that way it'll keep it steady as you're working on the piece. And always, I didn't say this, I know I've said it to you many times, but sometimes we have new people. But when you're pushing pins in, if you go this way, your fabric has a tendency to move, and so remember to go straight down and then turn. And you're going to keep, because you don't want to see the gray on the back, you don't want to see the teal on the front, and by going straight in and then flipping your pin, it will work that way. And I suggest that you sew from the top right, where you don't have a point that's going to get into that your machine, the little needle hole that's there. And we're gonna, I marked it so that you could see what I was doing on camera, but again, with this Sew Steady mat, I can just line it up here and go for it, and then I wouldn't have to do the marking, which is really nice, because I appreciate that, not having to mark, and that's one of the reasons why I've loved this mat so much. And I've talked about this a little bit. Okay, I've got an issue here. Let me the fraying got under my got down into there, so that's not a good thing. So let me just take that out and make sure that I've got this. I may have to operate here on my machine for just a minute or explain to you how all this works. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, the fraying sometimes gets in my way. I'm not sure why. And unfortunately, or fortunately, it was while you were on camera. But it looks like it's all going well at the moment, so let's go back to this. And I'm going to turn this way simply because I have that fraying going on that side. Alrighty. I want to talk about what I've shared with you before, because we're going to turn this back to this side, and so I am going to sew on the line, but just to the inside of it, so it takes up that thread, because the thread does take up space in your work. So I'm going to sew on the line, but just to the right of it, so that when I press this back, it's going to meet up at the edges where I want it to. And that's what I was trying to say before I ran into the issue with the fraying. Alright. So I will try to show you that again when I take that off. and press it so you can see what I'm talking about. Get all that excess thread out of the way. All right. So, I don't know if you can see, but with the, I didn't necessarily start out right on there, but it is, my thread is just right on the right hand side of my line, so that when I do press it back, the first thing, as you know, I always, and my line is going to go away because I used a friction pen. And we want to press the seam, you know, tight up against that, and then just hold it in place and not do the ironing. So what you want to see when you're completely done is that when that is pressed back and everything is laying correctly, you want to be able to see that that line goes to the top and that you don't see the gray from the bottom or the top. And now we're going to cut away that excess fabric on the back. Try to get about 1/4 of an inch. And now we have that first side done, and now we'll put on the second side. All right. And I just did the top one instead of the bottom, and instead of the next one that goes on, but that's all right, because I'm not really going to sew them together until I get them both done. So again, I'm going to drop a pin in, turn it sideways, and then back to the machine. And I think I'm going to go from this side again, simply because that's where I had my fraying from last time, so I don't want to catch any of those threads again. Alright, so now I do the same thing with this one. Wrinkle kind of came back. So I'll get that out of the way. And again, I want my 2 pieces so that it comes up to the point. Getting that in place. And I will tell you that by dropping the pin in, it makes keeping that in place just a little bit nicer. It does not, you know, move around on you at all, and so that's a good thing. I tend to get a little hyper about time and that kind of stuff. I don't know why, because I don't really need to. And I am starting to mumble. Alright, let's go back, and this one is now lined up. Alright, let's go back to this side, and we want to press both of these. And again, with the pressing, you know, always sinking those threads in place and running your iron down that seam line so it's, you know, it's nice and flat as you press back. And you can see that you have your 1/4 inch where it overlapped, so you definitely need to cut away that excess before you sew again. And I'm sorry I went out of camera. I'm just cutting that back piece off, and I have the top of the tree, and now I want to press these. The top one is the only one that you need to make sure that you press and trim away that excess so that it doesn't get caught in that top seam. Okay? All right, and again, want to trim away And what's nice about this as well is that this is way too long. So I have a mistake in my pieces here, because that is more than 12 inches. So my second one down is way too long, and so I'm going to need to trim that down to 12 inches. And I don't know what I did incorrectly there. So that was 7.5. It might have needed to be. I will make that correction. I will find out what the distance is there, and I'll correct that, or I just cut it wrong, and that might be what happened too. So let me remeasure and redo that, and I'll get that out to you. I will put it on the in the YouTube replay, and I'll make sure that in the comments I will make sure that you have that correctly, or it already is correct. Let me see what the dimensions are here. You know, I always say I'm not going to make those mistakes, and I seem to keep doing that. So I've got that at 7.5, and I don't think it should be 7.5. It might need to be. Oh, it says 3 by 6, and I cut it too big. I think I cut it 7.5. So you may be right on your pattern, and I think you probably are. So that if I took an inch off of each side, I think I'd be okay. So I will correct that, okay? And I apologize for that. And before I go on, and so finishing your tree would simply be sewing these blocks on top of the other, and at 12.5 inches it would finish off with that. And I am so sorry that I got that. Kristen says that they'll fix the pattern download too, and so I don't know why that happened. I went over it several times. All right, I'm just checking if there's any other questions. All right, I don't see any other things. So they will correct the pattern and put it up. I will correct that and get the correct measurements out right after I'm finished today, and then and put it on the YouTube replay, and we'll have that all taken care of. I made the first half of my peppermint candy. All right, and now I want to make the second half with you. And on the pattern, it's quite simple. You're going to make half square triangles. This is another partial flip and sew. As you can see, you're doing the very same thing on the side where the candy wrapper part is, as we did with the Christmas tree. It is exactly the same thing, so that part is made the same. And now I'm going to do a half square triangle. I start with 4 inches. Normally I wanted to finish at 3 inches, this part of the piece of candy. And so you would add 7/8. That's kind of what we call the magic number to that. And so we've added a little bit extra, and so that you have a little bit to trim off and get that nice 3.5 unfinished piece. So we're going to sew down both sides of this part of the candy. And again, I would use my mat and, run it. I'll wait till it gets into the camera. But if you look right here, my point is on the, this is the center where the needle is, and I've got my point on the 1/4 inch line on this mat. And it makes it really nice because then you don't really need to mark at all. Again, I did it simply for camera purposes, and for those of you who may not have this mat or something like it on your machine. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. And I'm going to share with you right here that because I didn't pin, this got a little bit off on the point, and so I'm grateful at this point for having that little bit of extra to work with. When I trim it down, it's going to come out correct because I am doing a little bit of trimming to that. But if you're very careful and if you use your pin, you can, at 3 7/8, it's going to come out when you make your half square triangle to be exactly what you need at 3.5. And I have actually, I know that some of you may not believe this, but I've actually been able to do that quite often. But I also do like to do the trimming because when I'm putting blocks together, it just makes it really nice. And it's one of those places where I will do a little extra to make sure that I have it all in there. So you can see that I have just a little bit on all 4 sides around my, I have my 45-degree line right on the seam line, and so that I can trim that tiny bit of excess off around there. And now I can put this directly on the 3.5. And this is right on the 45-degree line up and down. So I've got that one completed. And now let's do this one. So again, my 3, at 3.5, I get that 45-degree line right on the seam line. So now when I sew those pieces, I've got, everything absolutely where it needs to be. So now I'm going to sew this half of my candy piece. And so this side will need to be like that, so I get a pinwheel in the as you can see, it'll become a pinwheel there. So let's butt these two seams up against each other and get that tight in there. And here I do want to drop my pins in, and making sure that I have this straight on both sides, which I didn't. Alright, now make sure I didn't flip it. Okay, because it's going to go like that. Alright, but I want to sew on this side because I don't want to come into that double at that point. So I'm going to flip it around. Alright, I'm going to go back again, run my iron down that, and then I'm going to let it probably sit a little bit longer, so where that double seam is, I get that nice and flat there. Alright, so now I need to sew these two together, and actually I'm going to go back and iron this because I ironed it onto the wrong side. And so I want to get that seam going in the opposite direction so I can butt them up against each other. Alright, so now I can butt those seams up to each other, and if you look right in here, the top point of this and the top point of that is right there on that 1/4 inch seam. And as you know, I like to pin from the top right and go to the bottom left so it comes across, and I'll get that straight all the way where I don't have to pull my pin. I can actually sew right into that 1/4 inch piece of that. Alright. And here's where I want to make sure that that is down. And as you can see, with my 1/4 inch, I can go all the way up and take 1 stitch into the seam before I have to pull my pin out. And then I can finish that off. Alright. Alright, now it comes at this point in the center. If I was to iron to one side or the other, it's going to have, a bit of a little bit of a lump there. Not so much that it would be tough to deal with. There's a couple of things, and one of them is this acorn precision piecing products, and this is the Easy Press solution. Even if I were to bring that over to one side and have a little bit of a lump there, I can, spritz a little bit of this precision piecing right onto that, and it settles the fabric and it makes it lay really flat. So if you have not used the Acorn precision piecing stuff, that is just an excellent product for getting that flatness, especially in the center of, anything where 4 or more seams come together. And the other thing that you can do is your thumbs on either side of the seams, not on the seams, and then just pull it in opposite directions, which pops that thread right in here. And now I can go back and I can press these in opposite directions. And so I'm going to press my the iron right into that center part, okay, and make sure that I have these going in both directions. And I know the camera doesn't make that easy to see, but now this is really pretty flat, and there's really no rise in it at all. And you've got this cute little pinwheel in the back of your piece, and so it's simply on either side, twisted in opposite directions. But if that piece is still bothering you right there in the center, just spritz a little bit of that Acorn precision piecing stuff on it, and that just comes out completely flat. And I don't know that you're going to see much on here, but I put some in one of these spray bottles, and I'll just spritz that centerpiece, and I'm just basically going to set my iron down, let it dry out that center. And what is amazing is that it is just so flat. It all just becomes really, really flat. And you could certainly spray it on the back side, have it on the front side, either way, and it's just wonderfully done that way. All right, so now we're going to do the same thing that we did with the Christmas tree. We're going to sew these two on either end of this. And I lost some of my, got too close to the iron and I lost some of my friction pen. But I've got my Sew Easy mat, so you can see where, hopefully you can see where I lost some of my marking. But I'll just keep that point down here. Right on there. And now you're going to, and so I'm watching down here at my point. I'm really not watching by my needle, which is a good thing to do whether you have the mat or not, because you're going to keep it straighter and it's going to come out a little bit nicer for you with that. And I'm going to go ahead and remove back of this. Press this so now I have this completed, but I need to add my corners on, and I am going to do the same thing on these corners, fitting them in and sewing those down. And again, both of these blocks are the sew and flip method. And especially when you're sewing on the side of something, these leaders and ender pieces that I always use are excellent for that, because they don't they don't allow the thread to bunch up in the back, which adds bulk, and it also gets you started a little bit quicker on the sewing of And so for me, it's almost a necessity to do that. All right, so I have my 2 pieces there that I'm going to trim off, and we're almost completed with these 2 blocks. All right, then the last is to sew these 2 together, and I want to make sure my end pieces, and as I've shared with you many times before, pin straight in, then turn, and I want to do both ends so that if I have to do any easing at all, which it doesn't look like I really do this time, but I want to pin both ends so that the easing is equal across my my piece. So I start always with the ends, or if I'm matching seams in the middle, which on this one I don't need to do that. I would start in the middle and then do both of my ends. But because this didn't match any seams in the center, I simply worked on, both of my ends, and that way any easing that was required would be in there. But again, you don't have any seams to match. All right. And we have our little piece of candy, and if you want to have this to be bigger, fit into it differently, you can put as Susan did in her pattern. She has pieces on the end of the background fabric, and so it would be this for me on either side of that candy. You can leave it as it is, because it's one of those little candy wrapper blocks, and I love those soft peppermint candies, and hopefully that came out to do that. Now next week we will have the last block for the quilt, and I will have the blocks put up and give you some ideas of setting for that for next week. And look for my comments on the YouTube and in the forum, and I will make the corrections on that. And if there is any corrections, it may have just been my cutting that is the problem on that that piece in the center where the C and the D is. But we'll make those corrections if it needs it, or I will let you know if it was just my mistake on there. So I appreciate you being here as always, and I hope this last week before Christmas is not too stressful, and that your preparations for your holiday, for those who are celebrating it, are, peaceful and joyful and enjoying family. And I will see you next Saturday on the 23rd, and we'll finish up with this before Christmas, with the next day being Christmas Eve and then Christmas Day, or however you're going to be celebrating next weekend. So thank you for everything. I so appreciate all of you every day. All right, and blessings to you for this week.